Oh, what a night! Not late December 1963, but November 22nd, 2009, in our nation's capital. What a night! An animal, two three-ways, and a boosting of Kofi, with a lot of eliminations, please. Survivor Series, what a night! I'm John Rankin with the Retro View of WWE Survivor Series 2009 from the formerly MCI Center, now the Verizon Center in Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, a once proud capital. Reduced to whatever the fuck is coming. Nevertheless, let me know your thoughts on this show in the comments, please. Arguably one of the best Survivor Series, at least of the modern age, if not of all time. 6 matches, a lot of great, elements, a great crowd, a really raucous fucking crowd. And let's talk about some facts and figures, though. This building has a 20,000 seating capacity. They had around 12,500 fans. And it was the home of Starrcade from 97 all the way till the final one in 2000. They had diminished stuff from like 17,000 to like 16-something thousand to like 8,000 to like 5,000. Yeah, they weren't doing all that well by the end. But let's look at the 2007 Survivor Series that had, I believe, Randy Orton against Shawn Michaels, where Shawn Michaels couldn't use the Sweet Chin music. That was in Miami, 12,500 people, and had around 341,000 pay-per-view buys. Now, this one did well on pay-per-view buys, but in comparison to other events like this, they did good, but, obviously when you take a look, you gotta look at these facts and figures and buys with a grain of salt. But the 2008, just before, Boston, Massachusetts, just about 12,500 fans, 319,000 pay-per-view buys. 2010, back in Miami, 8,000 fans. Ouch, they had a significant drop there. 244,000 pay-per-view buys. 2011, Madison Square Garden, where The Rock made his return to the ring for the first time in 7.5 years. 16,749 fans. 281,000 pay-per-view buys. So let's take a look at the 2009 to early 2010, crowds and stuff like that to give you an idea. This is arguably one of the best pay-per-views, even if it didn't have the most buys. And so that being said, Royal Rumble in Detroit, they had about 16,700 fans, 450,000 pay-per-view buys. No Way Out at the Key Arena, now Climate Pledge Arena in Seattle. I did not go. I kind of wish I could have, but at the time, I can't remember if it was money. I don't remember the exact deal. But 11,200 fans. Still not great because that building does hold about 18,000. They probably could have fit more people if they had hyped it better, but that was down to 272,000 pay-per-view buys. And then Mania 25 at Reliance Stadium in Houston. They had 72,749 fans. It was probably more like 68, but nevertheless, 975,000 pay-per-view buys. So, okay, pretty goddamn good. Backlash in Providence, Rhode Island, down to 8,300 or so fans, considering it would be hard to fit 72,000 people in an arena in Providence, considering I don't think there are 72,000 people in Rhode Island. Har, har. They were down to 182,000 pay-per-view buys, and that's actually kind of disappointing, in all honesty. I'm actually a bit surprised. I think that had Edge against Cena, where Big Show put him through the goddamn spotlight. But Judgment Day at the Rosemont Horizon, they were up to 14,800 fans and 228,000 pay-per-view buys. Extreme Rules in Newark, New Jersey. They had about 9,100 fans. They had 213,000 pay-per-view buys. The Bash in Sacramento, they had almost 12,000 fans, and they were up to, well, actually, they were down to 178,000 pay-per-view buys. Night of Champions, they were in Philly. They had 17,700 or so fans, 267,000 rather, pay-per-view buys. So they were doing a lot better there. That had, I believe, Punk against Jeff Hardy, if I recall correctly. SummerSlam also had Punk versus Jeff Hardy. And that was in the Staples Center, 14,000, 116 fans, and they were up to 369,000 pay-per-view buys. Breaking Point was in Montreal, and they were, they had 12K, so that's not terrible in the Bell Center. It's not a sellout. But they had 169,000 pay-per-view buys. Ouch. And then Hell in a Cell, they were in Newark again. I can talk. They were actually in New Orleans for Extreme Rules, by the way. I do apologize. I have bad handwriting. 12,356 fans, and they were back up to 283,000 pay-per-view buys. And then Bragging Rights, Pittsburgh, 13,500 fans. down to 181,000 pay-per-view buys. Pay-per-views were starting to struggle at this point because it was getting hard to justify fans paying a premium price. Even if you reduce the rate from WrestleMania and the Big Four, it's still hard to argue that a lot of these pay-per-views are worth it. This one was, though, because you got two great three-ways. Oh my, even the women's elimination match that was rushed wasn't all that bad, but TLC was in San Antonio, 15,226 fans, and they were back up to 228,000 pay-per-view buys, and then they were up in Atlanta for the 2010 Rumble, almost 17,000 fans and 462,000 pay-per-view buys. So they were up from the 2009 one, which is surprising because the 2010 one I thought was a bit weird. That being said, a homecoming for the Animal Batista and various other, elements here. So quite a memorable Survivor Series from 1987 to now. They show The Undertaker debuting in 1990. And then Cole, King, and Stryker on commentary. And look, Matt Stryker wasn't the worst commentator at times, but he could get overbearing and annoying. So Justin Roberts was doing the ring announcing duties, and the dark match was Santino versus Chavo. So yeah, that's good. That's exactly what we need. So Team Miz had Miz, Ziggler, Sheamus, Drew, and Swagger. Against Team Morrison, that was Morrison, Evan Bourne, that was Matt Hardy, Fit Finlay, or Finlay, I believe as he was just called here, and also Shelton Benjamin. It is wild that some of these guys are still wrestling, and some of these guys are still wrestling. You could argue Matt Hardy really hasn't been able to move since about this point. They had such high hopes for Swagger. Swagger had been the ECW champion, beating Matt Hardy earlier in the year, I believe, and retaining at the Rumble. That caused Matt Hardy to turn on Jeff, but then he would join back up with Jeff before Jeff left the company. And Swagger would lose the ECW title, I believe, at Backlash, and then they had high hopes for Drew McIntyre that they pretty much gave up on quickly right after Mania 26. He won the Intercontinental title from Morrison soon after this, but then would lose it, April or May? And then, unfortunately, would just fall further down the card. They had hope for Sheamus. Sheamus is still there. They had hope for The Miz. Miz had been rising up quite a bit. And they had hope for Morrison, but seemed to pull the plug on him. And then there are other people here as well. So, really, the eliminations came fast and furious within the first little bit. We did have a Shooting Star Press eliminate Ziggler. And then Drew eliminated Evan Bourne right after that. And that was within 15 to 20 seconds of each other. And then Sheamus eliminated Finlay, because Finlay had a damaged cornea, I guess, or retina. That was 7 minutes. So after 7 minutes, we then get more eliminations. We get a Starship Pain, from Morrison pinning Swagger. So they started coming fast and furious in the final little bit. The first ref got knocked out during the interim here. Apparently an inadvertent knee. I don't know if it was Scott Armstrong or not. The Miz would end up pinning Shelton. Miz has never been a ring general, but he certainly wasn't the best at this point. But then, basically, Stryker then basically talks about the complacency of a lot of the youth. They're playing video games and they feel entitled, so foreigners come over and take their jobs. No, really, he said a variation of that. Drew pins Matt, and now it's 3-on-1 basically, because we have Morrison against Sheamus, Miz, and Drew. And even though Morrison tries to fight back in the last few minutes, he's unable to. Eventually falls to the Celtic Cross. So the final three, the sole survivors, are Sheamus, Miz, and Drew. And it made sense that we went with these final three, we being the company that I am not part of, but it made sense that they went with these guys, but it would only end up really working out for Sheamus. I mean, yeah, it would work out for Miz to an extent, but Drew, yeah, it didn't. It worked out for Drew in the end because he left after his 2014 release, reinvented himself and Impact and on the Indies, and then came back. And even though there's been some issues, he's done some good stuff. So, then basically, they thank the National Guard and all our military and everything. And there are many great people in the military. They just didn't want Ashley Mazzaro to talk about what she went through with one particular person that posed as a military person. Or maybe was. I don't know. I just feel bad for Ashley Mazzaro. So, there was comedy with Kofi's team. Christian was talking about, like, he's the only one who's, from ECW or Canadian. He was the only one that was white. That was the running joke. And then we get a package on Batista and Ray. And at Bragging Rights, there was a four-way match where Ray stopped Batista from becoming world champion again. And then Batista with, I think the best heel turn that he's ever done. You're supposed to be my friend, beating him up and all that stuff and everything. And the crowd was cheering. And Batista got a major league pop in his hometown. Yes, there were some boos. There were more boos, I think, for Ray trying to get in offense because Batista, is from Washington, D.C. or the environs. As Batista versus Ray, David Goliath. Ray would hit and run, do some good stuff, stick and move. And Batista ended up demolishing him and basically, absolutely just throttling him. Boom, 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 boom. And then he would hit, spine busters. He hit Batista bombs. There was one more time. He hit another one. And the ref called it off because Ray could not continue. Then Batista got a chair. There were Batista chants. He would then end up, getting Ray up like, okay, all's forgiven and everything. I paid you back for what you did, but then he had a spine buster on the chair. So he did a stretcher job for Ray. Weird how Batista would enter the Rumble, 2 months after this. And yet you would get Ray against The Undertaker in a match for the world title. And I mean, I guess the best way to describe, why they did that would be they didn't want Batista to lose to The Undertaker. They want Undertaker to retain the championship there. But still, kind of weird that Ray was the one that did the stretcher job here, but then got whatever. It's fine. But yeah, then Undertaker, I think, got a busted nose at one point because Ray's knee brace hit him. I know that he ended up inadvertently injuring him. And I mean, I do that in quotation. He didn't mean to, but his knee brace ended up, I believe, hurting Undertaker, broken orbital socket or concussion or something in 2010. So they had to write him off for a little bit till he returned against Kane in SummerSlam in 2010. So, okay. So then Team Orton is talking strategy. Orton's talking about he was hoping that Regal would become the ECW champion, that Punk would become the world champion. This kind of, once he got to Punk, Punk's like, well, we thought our guy would lead by example and become the WWE champion and not get embarrassed by Kofi Kingston in Madison Square Garden. But he did. And then that led to arguments and everything. And Punk was great here, and Orton was great here, because Orton was on fire as the evil son of a bitch and all that. So it's Team Kingston, Kofi Kingston, Christian Cage, or Christian rather at this point as he was known, because he wasn't Christian Cage. I'm so used to calling him Christian Cage because he's been AEW for the last few years. MVP, Truth, and Mark Henry. Against Team Orton, it was Randy Orton, CM Punk, CM Punk, CM Punk, Cody Rhodes, Ted DiBiase Jr., and William Regal. Yes, Legacy was still together. They wouldn't be together for much longer. What could have been for Kofi until we had Orton going, stupid, stupid, stupid. This didn't, take too long to kick off because, one, they showed the package of the MSG show, which I probably should have retro-viewed that one because I remember that show being pretty good, and I love the crowd shots and just a shot of the entrance. And they had that great, I believe it was a 3-team match. Cena and Undertaker, I believe, were teaming up, and it was DX, and then it was Big Show and Jericho, if I remember correctly. But then you also had Kofi and Orton getting in a brawl, boom, 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 boom. There you go. They got in that big argument. They did all that. It was great. It was great shit. So, this is where they really wanted Kofi to get his revenge, continue to get his revenge. And they really had high hopes for Kofi. It is a shame that Orton threw a goddamn tantrum. I'm not saying that Kofi would have become WWE champion at that point, or even in 2010, but it seemed like they were ready to elevate him, and then Orton decided to again throw the aforementioned bitch fit. So, Mark Henry got pinned after an RKO within the first minute. I mean, it was ridiculous. A couple minutes later, GTS to Truth, so yeah, not looking great for Kofi's team right here. But then Christian did a springboard sunset flip and managed to pin Ted DiBiase Jr., who's part of that whole scam thing from Mississippi. Read up on it. Read up on Ted DiBiase and Mississippi scam and you'll understand. MVP ends up kicking Regal, and getting the victory. I believe it was a drive-by kick or whatever the hell they called. So action kept going. We got Crossroads, pinning MVP. So yeah, again, not exactly looking great for Kofi's team here. They really wanted to see Kofi win. Anytime Kofi got his hands on Punk, or especially Orton, the crowd was roaring. They were ready to see Kofi get elevated. A kill switch pins Cody, so it's 2-on-2 now. It's Christian and Kofi against Punk and Orton. And things are looking good. Things are, they're looks like, things are, they're looking up. Like Hornswoggle trying to get something off the second shelf. But the kill switch, the unpretty or whatever you want to call it, kill switch I think is better. Because unprettier just, I don't know. I always thought that sounded kind of goofy. But Punk manages to break it up just before the 3 count. So, okay, Christian manages to, he's running, Orton hits the corner. Boom, RKO, 1, 2, 3. So now it's down to Kofi against Punk and Orton. Things are not looking good for Mr. Kingston here. Imagine if they made Kofi Kingston the king of the ring. Now picture the initials. You're welcome. So, and it goes back to Krusty the Clown. That's not good. So, he did manage to hit an SOS on Punk and got a 2 count. Orton, meanwhile, is standing out there just waiting like, okay, Punk will take care of it. Punk will take care of it. Because realistically, after Kofi put him through a table on Madison Square Garden, at Madison Square Garden, he did not want to get in the ring with Kofi. He wanted somebody else to do dirty work, and then he would come play cleanup. And then Kofi managed to, this is right at the finish of the match. He manages to, counter a roll up. The Punk, gave him 1, 2, 3, and then he slips a little bit. Orton gets in. Boom! Trouble in Paradise. Right on the money. 1, 2, 3 within 15 seconds. He pins Punk. He pins Orton. Former world champion. Former WWE world champion. And there you go. Kofi's off to the races for about a month until the stupid thing. But that being said, good stuff. I really did appreciate the fact that they did that. That they, managed to, have one hell of a moment. Major pop for Kofi winning, by the way. So there we are. So far, so good. And then we get to Undertaker versus Jericho versus Big Show for the World Championship. It's a triple threat match. This is famous for a couple things. One, I'm from Winnipeg. Go back to Toronto. I'm from Winnipeg, you idiot. And also, the fact these were the tag team champions and them together could not beat The Undertaker. I mean, granted, it was Jericho at this point and Big Show, especially in the state he was in, even in 2009. It was fine. It wasn't great, though. It was good enough. I mean, it was like an extended TV match, though, for being honest. Jericho does end up hitting Big Show with the world title accidentally, but just a 2 count for that. We just get 2 counts regardless of who's getting hit with the title, who's getting pinned. And then we get some pin breakups. And eventually the Hell's Gate, that, submission that Undertaker came up with, the triangle choke. And he got Big Show to tap out. And Big Show was bleeding in some variety because Undertaker's arm had blood on it. Not much, but enough to notice. So yeah, Undertaker got the victory. It wasn't awful. But then it's funny that Jericho and Big Show would be the tag team champions for... I think they would actually only be the tag team champions until TLC. They would lose them to DX, but it's just, I don't know. They would lose one of them. Because they broke up right after, I believe, WrestleMania 26. Because DX had the championships, and I think they lost them back in a 3-way match. But nevertheless, we then get to Josh Matthews, that noted piece of shit, talking to Drew McIntyre, Sheamus, and Miz. And they're the future. It's the way of the future, the way of the future, the way of the future. So, it is Team Mickey. It is Mickey James, Eve Torres, Gail Kim back in WWE at this point after a pretty good run in Impact because she wanted more money and I believe she had a 6th sister or something. Melina and Kelly. Star power all around. Firepower in the ring here. Good grief. Against Team Michelle McCool, Layla, the gorgeous Layla I might add, Jillian Hall, Alicia Fox, or rather the lovely Alicia Fox. Yeah, that's all you're going to get out of me. And Beth Phoenix. This is what they were doing with talents like Mickey and Beth at this point. Remember how Lay Cool did the Piggy James thing? I'm sure they didn't want to, as much as I had my issues with Michelle McCool, thinking that she was decent in the ring, but not necessarily that great. The Piggy James thing was a bad idea. Yeah, let's make fun of Mickey, you know, being big, even though she wasn't. Yeah, they rushed this. They rushed the eliminations. I mean, I'm not even going to go over the eliminations. And no offense against the women. This wasn't an awful match, but this was a cool-down match. This was the death slot. Melina and Mickey basically were the sole survivors. Yeah. So don't try this at home. The video and everything, necks broken, muscles torn, all this. Don't try this at home. Batista then basically says Ray was embarrassed tonight and implies he will embarrass other people in the future. He'll turn complete. He would go until May of 2010 when he quit, went to Hollywood, and thankfully has become very, very successful because he was older, injury prone. I'm not knocking Batista. He's done some great stuff, does stuff for great causes. Not all of his movies are great, but to me, he shows more range than Rock and Cena. And I would say more range than Rock, and Cena shows some range, but to me, Batista's done the better catalog of movies. So, speaking of Cena, we get John Cena, wappa-doo-da-da-da-da, against Triple H and Shawn Michaels. It is DX against the man that can't be seen. Triple threat WWE Championship match. Big fight feel here. Crowd was up for it. And probably has the best opening few seconds of any match. Bell rings. You got Cena in the corner. And then you have, you got Cena in the corner there. And you have Shawn, and then you have Triple H. And Shawn Michaels super kicks Triple H. Big pop. Cena has that shocked look on his face. And Triple H takes a great bump through the goddamn rope. It was great shit. But see, I love that opening because it sets the tone for the fact that, yeah, DX, they may be aligned, but guess what? They're going for that title. It makes sense. It makes perfect sense. And also, Shawn Michaels could keep one eye on Cena and then one eye on Triple H at the same time without turning his head. The crowd was popping. They were off to the races. Yeah, it was more often than not Cena and Shawn at first, and then Triple H and Cena, and then Triple H and Shawn. It was more often than not one guy took an extended break for a while. But they also did have some nice triple teaming that added to this. And yeah, you could argue this wasn't as good as another triple threat that Shawn Michaels and Triple H were involved in on a big stage, WrestleMania 20, with another man that got involved in a triple threat back a little bit later in June of 2007, but the referee wasn't there to signal for the bell. So basically we get this. We got some good pacing here. And Triple H comes back, spinebuster Shawn through the goddamn table. It's the greatest hits of each guy. Because Triple H at this point is ready to wind down his full-time career pretty much after, I think Backlash. Is Backlash 2010 or is whatever the fuck it was that was in April of 2010. I don't know if it was Backlash or not. Whole point is right there, Sheamus beat him. He would come back later. But Triple H, by this point, was ready to wrap up his full-time career because he was getting more executive power and also he was getting older. And Shawn would have wrapped up his full-time career and never came back at all. Not for any amount of money for a match that pretty much tarnished the in-ring, acumen of pretty much every single guy there. It was cool to see Undertaker's entrance live just before Super Showdown 2018, but man, wasn't as bad as the Saudi event, though. DX guys face off, and major boost for Cena anytime he did his stuff. And then a long STF on both men, first on Triple H and on Shawn. And then we got a sweet chin music to both. And Triple H, basically, falls on Cena right after the sweet chin music. The referee turns around, not in enough time to basically get a 2 count. And then AA on Triple H, AA on Shawn Michaels, hitting him on Triple H. And then Cena covers Triple H. 1, 2, 3. Big pop. There were boos, but it was a big pop because it was a great match. So, arguably one of the best Survivor Series that they've ever fucking done. I really fucking enjoyed this. I thought it had a lot of good moments. I thought it had a lot of good fun. And, yeah, it wasn't entirely perfect, as far as, if you break down the minutia of the in-ring action, but it still had such great pacing to it. This was an example of WWE, even when their creative was starting to hit a bit of a lull, they were actually doing some good stuff. So nevertheless, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Recklin. I'll see you soon.